I am guessing that you have tried a lot of things to help you stop feeling so anxious nearly so often, but none of them have really worked as well as you were hoping they would. Maybe you've even stopped doing things that typically trigger your anxiety. You've stopped going to certain places, being around certain people, engaging in certain activities, but the anxiety is still there and you don't know what gives. Well, today I'm going to talk to you about a really counterintuitive way to start working through your biggest struggles with anxiety that is really going to help. It's probably going to surprise you, but it's really going to benefit you. But first, if you're new here, welcome to our incredible little corner on the internet. Take a second, introduce yourself in the comment section below. If you're back again, always good to have you. Special shout out to my shifters. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. The button's there. If you get something out of the video, if you could like it, that would be amazing. Either way, my name is Kristina, and I am a registered clinical therapist, a researcher, and a therapeutic coach, and I help heart-centered humans break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And anxiety is one of those big things that can really hold us back, especially when we don't do certain things. We don't show up in life in certain ways because we don't want to feel anxious. We don't want to do things that make us feel anxious, so we avoid them altogether. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, about this counterintuitive way to work through your biggest struggles with anxiety is being willing to feel anxious. Crazy, right? But so often we think that the way to work through our anxiety is to never feel anxious. And so you don't go to certain places, you don't try certain things, you don't engage with certain people, you don't have certain experiences in life because you're like, that's going to make me feel anxious. And I don't want to feel anxious, so I'm not going to do them. So then what that is telling your brain is that you cannot handle feeling anxious. And so you become so afraid of feeling anxious that you avoid all these things that make you feel anxious and then never actually work through the anxiety because instead of facing it, you're hiding from it. And this doesn't do anything to actually deal with our anxiety. All that it does is tells our brains that we can't handle anything that makes us uncomfortable, which then doesn't give us the opportunity to get comfortable with these things. It gives us the excuse to stay held back, hidden, pushed down, and avoiding so much of the good things in life. When we only focus on not wanting to feel anxious, we miss out on life. A perfect example of this, just the other week here in Vancouver, I hosted our very first Big Shift Live. It was our 2-day intensive in real life, in-person workshop, event, extravaganza where people came from all over the world to be together, to learn together, to heal together, to grow together, to connect together. And it was amazing. And the people that came were amazing. And what we did together in those 2 days was amazing. But you better believe it when I say that many of those people that were coming to this event were anxious about coming. A lot of them were coming to a new city. A lot of them were coming to a new country. A lot of them were coming to a brand new circumstance and situation with people that they did not really know other than some points of connection in our Shift Society Facebook group. But this was new for so many of them. And I actually took a poll in the group where I asked them, how many of you felt anxious or nervous, or maybe even were going to bail on coming at the last minute because you were feeling anxious about coming to Big Shift Live and doing this thing that was new and that was unknown and that was triggering your anxiety? And everyone, except for one person, put up their hand. Everyone in the group put up their hand. Now, not all of them were thinking about bailing at the last minute, but all of them were feeling anxious, nervous, apprehensive about coming. But every single one of them did it anyways. And they showed up and they allowed themselves to be there, to participate They allowed themselves to belong, and every single person by the end of it felt better, happier, more connected, felt like they'd done some deep inner shifting work. And all of this they would have missed out on if they had let not feeling anxious be the thing that was driving their decision. They wouldn't have come if they were like, you know what, I can't feel anxious, and doing this trip and going to this thing, going into this unknown situation, it's making me feel anxious, and I don't want to feel anxious, so I'm not going to do it. And then anxiety would have won. Anxiety would have been the thing that was making their decision for them, not their brave, courageous self that was willing to do it with the anxiety. This was something they wanted to do, and if they had been focusing on never experiencing anxiety, they would have missed out. Now, let me ask you this. Do you ever think that the people that do the things that would make you feel anxious are doing those things without feeling any smidge of anxiety? Okay, maybe some of them are, but the truth is most of them are doing it with the anxiety. Some of them are doing it with a lot of anxiety, but they are doing it anyways. They are grounding themselves. They are using healthy self-talk. They are encouraging themselves. They are getting the support that they need to be able to do it, not in the absence of anxiety, but with the anxiety. Courage doesn't happen unless there is something to fear. So it's not courageous to go to the fridge and get a glass of milk. It's courageous to do something that brings fear up in us. And that's what courage is. Being brave is doing it with the fear. Being courageous is doing it with the trepidation or the hesitation. And so instead of not ever wanting to feel anxious and thinking that that's going to reduce your anxiety, maybe temporarily in that moment for that minute, but doing the things that make you feel anxious and working with yourself through that situation with the anxiety is what's going to tell your brain that you were in charge. Your anxiety isn't. And what it's also going to do is that the more that you do those things that typically make you feel anxious, the less anxious they're going to make you feel, because you are showing your brain that it's safe, that it's okay, that you can handle it, that you can do it. So many of those people that came to Big Shift Live are already excited for us to do the next one, which we are going to do in this next year. So make sure that you are on my email list. You can get my the free download in the description below. It's the Committed Self Journal that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. But if you get that free download, then you'll be on my email list and you will get notified when we have our dates for the next Big Shift Live. But every one of those people that came to that one were like, I'm excited to come to the next one. Not I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. I'm excited because they gave themselves that experience and showed themselves that they were okay. So if you tend to avoid difficult people, new situations, or different opportunities because you don't want to feel anxious, then you are missing out on so much of life. If you never want to have to deal with anyone that is difficult, that maybe makes you feel anxious, then you're probably going to be quite lonely, because all relationships bring up difficult feelings in us, especially if they are close relationships. All relationships come with discomfort. The closer you are to someone, the more your stuff comes out and the more things you typically have to work through, but that's part of it. It's not just running away from any kind of discomfort or any kind of challenge. It's using our courage and our bravery to not fake it until you make it, face it until you break it. If you are avoiding new, novel, interesting or different situations because there is anxiety that comes up around them, then you're going to have a pretty boring life. You're going to have a pretty isolated life. Now, as a little caveat, if you are someone that fears change and you get a lot of anxiety when you think about doing something different, even if it's something that you want to do, you're like, this is something that I want. Why am I feeling so anxious about it? That's just your primitive brain's way of trying to keep you alive. Because in sort of our primitive, that ancient part of our brain, its job is to keep you alive. And if you keep doing what you're doing, your brain says, okay, if we keep doing things this way, then it's a good thing because we're alive. So it's working. Whatever we're doing now, if the primary goal is to keep you alive, it is working. And so your brain is like, why do anything different? Because something different is unknown, and unknown could result in death. That's how savage that part of our brain can be. So knowing that there is this sort of natural instinct inside to avoid new and novel situations, but it's your job to acknowledge that fear, acknowledge that anxiety, and say, hey, anxiety, I see you. I see that you're trying to keep me safe. I see that you maybe even at some level be trying to keep me alive, but I'm okay. I can do this. I can face this. I can break this. And this whole idea about face it until you break it isn't just some catchy phrase that I came up with. It's actually neurobiology. So when we do the things that typically trigger our anxiety, as long as they're, safe and it's not tightrope walking between two 40-story buildings with no safety net underneath, if you're feeling anxious about that and it's stopping you from doing that, that's probably a good sign, especially if you've never tightrope walked before. But other than that, doing those things that might be triggering your anxiety, as long as they're not a threat to your existence, and doing them scared is going to show your brain that you can and that you are okay if you do. Of course, doing it with that healthy, helpful self-talk and with some grounding skills, if and when necessary, is going to be huge as well, so that you're not just kind of like white knuckling it and going into it and facing that thing really freaking out, but doing it well and being able to regulate yourself, being able to talk yourself through it in healthy, effective ways. That is going to be a game changer as well. And what that does is that creates new neural pathways in your brain. That is creating new experiences in your brain. That is showing your brain that it's okay and that you can do it. And the more you do it and the more you repeat it, the more that those new neural pathways are going to be laid in your brain, and it's going to become not anxiety triggering. It's not going to become so nerve-wracking because your brain has had experience upon experience that says, I can do this, I can handle this, and I'm okay if and when I do. So face it until you break it. Understanding that anxiety isn't the main problem, and it's not the thing that you need to avoid at all costs if you want to work through your biggest struggles with anxiety. Completely counterintuitive, but it's the unwillingness to feel anxiety that often keeps us the most stuck. If you are avoiding applying for the job because you're feeling anxious about it, if you are avoiding starting the side hustle or going for the promotion because it is bringing up anxiety, if you're not going back to school, even though you've really been wanting to because it brings up anxiety, if you've been not wanting to try new things, like even just going and taking a fun pasta making class because the thought of it is making you feel anxious, if you are not exploring new places and doing new things and having beautiful new experiences because it comes with anxiety, then you are going to be missing out. If even when it comes to yourself and your own sense of self, if you are constantly looking for reassurance from your partner, from your friends, from your boss, to keep telling you that you are okay, and really knowing that that constant reassurance needing is a result of anxiety, it's a manifestation of that deep-rooted anxiety, then asking for that and trying to get that all the time in order to help you stop feeling anxious is not going to do it. It's just sort of this surface thing that might feel good in the minute, like avoiding the anxiety avoiding the things that are going to make you feel anxious. It's going to make you feel safe for a minute, or getting that reassurance is going to make you feel safe for a minute. But if you haven't done the internal work, it's not going to last. It's not going to make a difference. So it's being willing to feel uncomfortable and talking yourself through it, being there for yourself through it. Now I'm going to ask you some really important questions, and I want to invite you to take a minute to reflect on and write down your answers to each one of them. You can even pause the video between each question and write down the question itself, and then take a few minutes to write down your answer and be as thorough as possible with it. Because the deeper you go with this, the more it's going to have a positive impact on helping you work through your biggest struggles with anxiety, especially when it comes to dealing with those circumstances, situations, or people in your life that tend to trigger anxiety in you. You ready? Let's do this. First question: how has your unwillingness to feel anxious been taking away from your life and the life you want to be living? Next question: what kind of life do you even want? Next question: what might you be willing to feel along the way to creating that life that you want? Next question: are you willing to bring anxiety along with you? Think about that. Think about what you really want. Think about how anxiety has been making your decisions for you instead of you making your decisions for you. And I want to invite you to start today with taking back that jurisdiction over your own life. Taking back the power from the anxiety and deciding that you are going to be the one calling the shots in your own life. Being a friend to yourself, being encouraging and supportive towards yourself along the way, grounding yourself and learning those grounding skills and practicing those grounding skills and practicing your healthy, helpful self-talk along the way so you can be your biggest supporter and encourager. Face it until you break it. And I have something for you that's going to help with that. It's what I mentioned before, that intentional self-journal. It's totally free. You can grab it in the description below, and that is going to help you become your intentional self. Not the unconscious self that is kind of going through life reacting or avoiding or repressing, but the intentional self who is committed to and intentional about better. Grab that in the description and let me know. How has anxiety been calling the shots in your life? And what are you going to start today to change that? As always, be good to yourself, be good to those around you, and until next time, take good